Hello, friends. Welcome back to the While We're Waiting Hope After Child Loss podcast. I'm Jill Sullivan, your host and one of the co-founders of the While We're Waiting ministry. As you're listening to this episode, we've just wrapped up our While We're Waiting weekends in Oklahoma and Arkansas, and we're preparing for our next one in Atascadero, California, coming up this weekend. Brad and I had the opportunity to facilitate the retreat here at the refuge, and it was such a blessing to meet these dear moms and dads and to hear the stories of their precious children. Even after 15 years of leading these retreats, we glean something new and valuable every single time we have this opportunity, and that is such a blessing. Remember, all of our retreats are free, and you can read about them on our website at www.whilewe'rewaiting.org. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Davey Blackburn to the While We're Waiting podcast. Davey is the founder of Nothing is Wasted Ministries, an organization dedicated to helping people navigate pain, trauma, and loss by discovering how God can bring purpose and redemption out of life's most difficult circumstances. Through coaching, resources, and his popular Nothing is Wasted podcast, Davey and his team have encouraged countless people who are walking through seasons they never would have chosen. But Davey's ministry was born out of a tragedy he never saw coming. In the fall of 2015, Davey and his wife Amanda were living what they described as a charmed life. They were planting a church in Indianapolis, raising their young son Weston, and eagerly anticipating the arrival of their second child. Then, in a single morning, everything changed. While Davey was away from home, 3 men broke into their house, shooting Amanda and setting in motion a series of events that would leave Davey grieving both his wife and their unborn daughter, Evie. In this first half of our conversation, Davey shares the story of that devastating day, the questions he wrestled with in the aftermath, and how God met him in the middle of unimaginable loss. We also talk about the unique grief of losing his unborn daughter, and the hope that has sustained him through the years since. Here's my conversation with Davey Blackburn. Hi, Davey. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Yeah, Jill, it's so great to be here with you. Great to be able to intersect our worlds and our lives, our ministries. It's just an honor to be with you, and I love what you guys do.
Yeah, well, and we love what you do. I've looked a lot into your ministry, listened to many of your podcast episodes myself, and am intrigued by what you do, and I'm excited for our listeners to get to hear about it today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we love the heartbeats of our ministry is to help resource. There are lots of kind of what you would call maybe niche care ministries, like what you guys do, where you're focusing on a specific constituent of people, a specific kind of loss. And, you know, you guys are built to lead retreats and do these experiences with people, which is something that we are not built to do. So we have made it our goal to help resource ministries like yours and other ministries that are tapping into our resources. So it's so just an honor to be able to serve your community in any way that we possibly can.
Thank you. I love seeing ministries like ours come together. You know, we do different things, but we can serve alongside of each other and serve more people that way. So I appreciate that.
It's like that's the way the kingdom was supposed to be built, right?
Exactly.
Collaboration, working together. Unfortunately, I come from church world, and all too often you see churches in turf wars and siloed out and not working well with each other. But when you see them work well together, you go, yes, this is the way God designed the kingdom to work.
Exactly. We work together. Now, for those who may not be familiar with your story, would you talk about what happened with your family in the fall of 2015?
Yeah. And going into the fall of 2015, if you were to look at our life and our world, up to that point, it was a very, very charmed life. I was married to Amanda. We'd been married for 7 years going into the fall. In fact, we celebrated August of 2015. We celebrated our 7-year wedding anniversary.
Yeah.
And we had a boy, Weston. He was just over a year old going into the fall of 2015. And we were pregnant with our second. And we were planting a church in Indianapolis. We had gotten the church up and going. We were probably 3 years into that, launch, which we found out later was more of like in a lot of respects, it was kind of a pre-launch. Once we got some training on how to actually plant a church, we realized, we've been for the last couple of years spinning our wheels because we're just gathering a group of people to actually launch our church. And so we had moved to Indianapolis from South Carolina in 2011, launched the church in 2012, relaunched the church in 2015. Going into the fall of 2015, it was Amanda and I's heartbeat and dream to build a church that would help the city come alive and would really help see people come to know Christ, that they would experience healing in Christ, that they would experience, addictions being broken and marriages restored. And we both had a real deep heart for the lost and evangelizing the lost and helping people come to know Christ. And so I'll never forget the weekend before everything happened in our life. Amanda looked at me and she was like, man, I love our life. I love our life. This church is taking root. It's finally, when you're church planting, you feel like God drops you in the middle of a parking lot and calls you to plant a forest. It feels so fragile. You have no idea if any day things are just going to collapse. And so we finally felt like we were at this place where we're going, okay, I think this is actually going to happen. We're seeing our dreams come to life right now in front of us. She and I both had grown up as pastors' kids. We didn't have a lot of like heartache or tragedy or loss in each one of our families. And so we had lived a pretty charmed life, had experienced hard in planting the church, but we had never experienced tragic.
Right.
And in November 10th of 2015, it was a Tuesday morning, I left to go to the gym early in the morning like I did every Tuesday morning. While I was away, there were 3 men who were on a random crime spree through Indianapolis. And they broke into the home 3 doors down from us, saw me leave for the gym that morning, and decided to break into our home.
Wow.
And Amanda was there. Our son Weston was in his crib upstairs, and Amanda got caught up in that. She was shot 3 times. And when I came home, I found her. When I found her, she was on our living room floor. She was unresponsive and unconscious, breathing very laboriously. And so called the paramedics. They got there. It felt like it took 3 hours for them to get there. It only took 3 minutes. But you guys know, if you're listening to this, that you experience something that is that shaking and traumatic, everything seems to go in fast motion and slow motion at the same time. You just lose all sense of time. And so the paramedics they attended to her. They got her into the ambulance. They asked us to follow her to the hospital. And I find myself in a waiting room with Weston, he's on my knee and we're going, okay, I'm saying, buddy, everything's going to be okay. Mommy's going to be okay. And fully expecting that they got her, her vitals taken care of, that everything's stabilized. When doctors and investigators came in and told me what had happened, that she had 3 bullet wounds in her. Now, Jill, I had no context for even when I came in to find her, a home invasion or, everything was just swirling, that I thought something had gone wrong with the pregnancy. And part of that reason is this. I'll kind of share a little bit of a backstory. About 2 weeks before all of this happened, we were on a trip to Chicago. She and I took a kind of a weekend romantic getaway to Chicago. And I had been turned on to this guy who was a pastor in Montana named Pastor Levi Lusko. I heard him preach a message at a church. And it's the first time I had heard of him and heard him preach. And I was so amazed at the faith that he had after losing his daughter, Lenya.
Yes.
And I came home that day. I was watching this message on my lunch break at Chick-fil-A, of all places, right? The anointed chicken. And the Holy Spirit comes over me. I'm just so filled with emotion. I'm just like, wow, this was amazing, this guy and how he's walked through this tragedy. I go home to Amanda and I say, hey, you've got to listen to this message. This is crazy, knowing that she and I were pregnant. So we listened to this message on this train ride to Chicago together, and we're both in tears. And she looks at me, Jill, she goes, Davey, I feel like God is leading us into a season of pain. I said, what are you talking about? She said, Davey, we've lived pretty charmed lives up to this point. And we've never experienced tragedy in our life, but we have a lot of people who are coming to our church who are broken, who are hurting, and we cannot relate to them. And she said, I don't want this to be true, but I just have this sense that we're going to lose the baby.
Wow. And
so, Jill, I put on reserve in the library. Now, what I had learned up to that point, 7 years being married to Amanda, is when she had just this keen sense of discernment. that when she had a sense like that, that we needed to really lean into that.
Mm-hmm.
So I put on reserve in the library Pastor Levi Lesko's book. So incidentally, it didn't come available until 3 days after Amanda passed away.
Wow.
So when I walk in to find Amanda, all my mind is thinking is something's gone wrong with the pregnancy.
Sure.
Here it is. It's happened in front of me, right? This is what she was sensing.
Mm-hmm. But
nothing in my mind went, oh, I'm going to lose Amanda.
Yeah.
And I was also operating under a bit of a, I guess you could call it either a naive theology, but this kind of idea that, hey, we're in the center of God's will. God called us away from this comfortable, convenient, beautiful job at a church in South Carolina to go plant this church. So because we're on the front lines of building God's kingdom, he's going to protect us. We're not going to experience tragedy. So all of this is kind of coming to a head as the doctors and investigators walk into the waiting room and they tell me what happened, that she had 3 bullet wounds in her and that it didn't look good. It was the prognosis was very grim. And Jill, I don't know if it was denial, shock, faith, some weird combination thereof. But I grabbed the doctor's hands and I prayed the biggest, boldest prayer of faith. I prayed for healing over Amanda. We had already named our baby Evie. She had this sense that it was going to be a girl. She was already collecting items for Evie's nursery. You know, moms just kind of get that sense. We hadn't done any kind of like testing or anything like that to find out the gender, but so we had already named her Evie. We were ready, you know, and so I pray this healing prayer over her, expecting fully everybody's going to be fine. They're going to recover. And 24 hours later in the hospital, Amanda was pronounced deceased. And Evie was too early for there to be any kind of viable option to save her. But, so I lost Amanda, my best friend, my ministry partner, my soulmate, and I lost our unborn baby, Evie, that day. And it turned my world upside down.
Oh, sure.
Completely changed everything about how I see God, how I see this world, how I see myself. And over the next several weeks, months, and years, God would lead me through quite the journey of healing to discover what it means to turn all of this around into some kind of redemptive purpose. Yeah.
What were your conversations with God like when you heard those words? She is not going to survive. She did not make it. You've lost the baby. All of those things, everything that you believed God was going to do and take care of for you did not happen. How did you talk with God about that?
Well, you know, early on, because everything happened so fast and it was such a whirlwind, I'm not sure I had many conversations with God except for just crying out for help.
Sure.
You know, I'll never forget when I came to her side and saw when, you know, they're in the living room, just saw the way that she was suffering. I didn't know what was going on, but just that there was such a panic. I just remember going, Jesus, no, Jesus, no, Jesus, no. Yeah. Just constantly calling out the name of Jesus. I'll never forget that moment. And then in the hospital, I think I was just in such shock that it was like, this can't be happening. And still under this belief that, okay, God, you're going to turn all this around and she's going to pull through. But there was a moment in the hospital, Jill, where, and it's really where the conception of the idea of nothing is wasted came into being. I was sitting in the hospital room with her sister, Amber. You know, people had come and gone. There'd been a lot of activity around the hospital over the first couple of hours. You know, our whole family there, people praying over her, singing worship songs over her. You know, in fact, what's really interesting is my wife now, Christy, so spoiler alert, we'll get to that, I'm sure, in a little bit, but
sure,
she had a friend who was a PA on the hallway above us. And so this PA comes down and texts her entire small group, of which Christy was on that text message before Christy and I ever knew each other. And she said, you guys would not believe what's happening. There is this family on the hallway below me, and there's like revival breaking out right now. Wow. And it was just it was a very marking experience to have our whole family there and just worship and impacting the doctors and the nurses and stuff there. And so, you know, there was a lot of experiencing the presence of God there. But then as all of that began to dissipate, hours into all of this, we're waiting these test results to come back. I'm sitting there with Amber. were on either side of the hospital bed, the same sides of the hospital bed that we were on 15 months earlier when she was bringing Weston into the world.
Yeah.
Just me and Amber. So here we are back again in this moment, just in a very different setting. I knew if Amanda could hear anything, she'd want to listen to worship music, and she'd want to listen to elevation worship, because that's what she used to listen to when she'd go for runs and different things like that. So I put on Pandora radio station, elevation worship. And Pandora is randomized. You don't get to choose what song comes up.
Right.
And so the first song that came up was a song called Nothing is Wasted by Elevation Worship. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, there are people who describe experiencing like a heaven touching earth kind of moment, where the paper thin veil between heaven and earth just seems to dissipate.
Yeah.
And the Holy Spirit shows up in a very palpable way. And that's what we experienced right there. I mean, just a very moving experience. I looked at Amber, she looked at me. There was no words that were necessary. And we just knew that the Lord was saying, this is not going to turn out the way that you want it to, but I promise I'm not going to waste this.
Yeah.
And so that became a mantra for our family in the weeks to follow, going, okay, we don't understand what's happening here, but God, we're choosing to trust that you're not going to waste this. So in the hospital, I experienced the presence of God there in a way that I could not deny. Mm. So that, I think, would set up the conversations then that I would have with God the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So the conversation, most of it was cloaked in, I don't understand what in the world is happening and how you could allow this to happen.
Right.
Right? But I'm choosing to lean into you because I know that you're real. You've shown up in my life plenty of times up to this point. I was 30 years old. I'd experienced God in really powerful ways up to that point. So I know you're real, and you seem to have cared about me up to this point. Now I'm struggling to believe that you really care. Now I'm struggling to believe that you're kind. How could you take the purest person that I have ever known in my entire life? How could you take her from this world in that kind of violent, egregious way? So that's where the conversation was cloaked with me and God. And that ultimately, I had to wrestle that down. It was and I encourage people now in their grieving process to wrestle with God. What we often do is we take these questions and we think that maybe we shouldn't ask God these questions. And so, or God already knows that we have these questions, so we don't actually engage him with these questions. And then we end up tucking them in our back pocket and walking away from God. It ends up hollowing out our soul, when instead God's inviting us into a wrestling match like he did with Jacob in Genesis, to wrestle with him over these questions. And in that, God is going to reveal to us the richness of who he is and some of the hidden mysteries of what the plans he has for our life, that begins to put a healing salve over our soul. But it only happens through a deep, deep wrestling. So that would set up the next several weeks and months of me just wrestling with God, turning over those questions. Any new question that would come up, beginning to turn over that question with God. And so it was almost like I was, the disciples in John chapter 6, where Jesus, he teaches this really hard teaching and everybody walks away. And he looks at them and goes, are you not going to walk away too? And they say, where are we going to go? You have the words of life. So that's what I felt like. I'm like, okay, I am really mad at you. I don't understand what you're doing right now. I don't know if I want to lean into you. I don't know if I can trust you. But where am I going to go? Mm-hmm. Exactly. You have the words of life. The alternative to me wrestling with you is, it's a lot more destructive. So this is the route that I'm choosing here, and you're going to need to reveal to me what's going on here. And so it felt a lot like Job in a lot of respects. Sure. I'm sure many people who are listening to this, they can resonate with that. Mm-hmm.
I love the picture of wrestling with God. My friend Ronnie likes to say, as long as we're wrestling with God, we're facing him. We're face to face with him when we're in the wrestle. And so we've got to stay in the wrestle. And like you said, the alternative is walking away.
Yeah.
And we don't want to be there for sure.
Yeah.
In those early days after Amanda went to heaven, you were not only grieving and in shock, but now you're single parenting your son, Weston. How did you deal with that?
Well, I had a lot of really good, helpful, loving and caring family members that helped with that.
Yeah.
Immediately, I haven't shared this very often. But I'll share it now. Immediately, it was very difficult because if you look at Weston, he looks so much like Amanda.
Yes.
I mean, he is, I joke around sometimes, Jill, now that I must have very recessive traits in my genetics because none of my kids look like me. Weston looks very much like his mom. And, now we actually have a niece who I looked at her the other day and I was like, oh my gosh, I wonder if that's what Evie would have looked like, know? But it was hard. It was very difficult at first because every time I would see Weston, he was the thing that would remind me of the loss of Amanda. And at the same time, I think we all recognize that when our feelings feel like a mixed bag, it's like they're not binary. They're very convoluted and they overlap and integrate. And so while I was feeling like a discord there, I was also feeling so much more drawn into him too.
Yeah.
So it's like looking at you, Weston, triggers me. And at the same time, I feel this like even deeper protective fatherly nature over you. It was very difficult to reconcile, but I was grateful because unlike a lot of people, when they walk through grief, their job is pretty demanding. They're at, it's like, okay, I got to go back to work or I got to, they have trouble. They maybe don't have support around them to kind of step in and help out with certain things. I had a lot of support and I had a calling or a job as the pastor of a church that while you would think that was extremely demanding, and it was in certain seasons, my church was like, hey, we're all in shock over this. God is that. I mean, there is something happening here that has unearthed and upended all of us. So you take as much time as you need to heal. We'll just like band together, all of us.
Yeah.
So I was able to step back and not have to bear a lot of leadership responsibilities for the next several months. And I could really focus on grief and Weston.
Yeah.
And so I tried to figure it out and go, okay, well, maybe I'll work, 2 days a week or something. Cause there was also something in me that I needed some purpose work. I needed a reason to wake up. And there was a spiritual battle that was happening there too, where I felt like the enemy had stolen something from me, and my job is very spiritual. So, in kind of a redemptive vengeance, it was like, well, how do I take back territory from the enemy? Well, I am a pastor to people's souls. I help continue to build this church. So I'm like, well, I still want to keep doing this. I don't want to just step away completely. And at the same time, I don't have the same capacity emotionally that I used to.
Sure.
So, we went through ebbs and flows of trying to figure that out over the next several months. It's like, okay, do I work 2 days a week and then spend the rest of the time with Weston? Do I work half days and spend a half day? That kind of stuff. But overall, I think the point is I had a lot of good support around me and great community, great family, people who were really helping and acknowledging, hey, this is a big deal and we want to help you, heal from this.
Yeah. What a blessing that is. But, as a pastor, you had poured yourself into those people. And I'm sure it was a blessing for them to be able to pour into you.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that because I think of the, Proverbs 31 of the Proverbs 31 woman. And it talks about this whole chapter of how she has poured into the community around her. And then it says she laughs at the days ahead.
Yeah.
And I've always looked at that to say, well, why is she laughing at the days ahead? Because, in this world, we're going to have trouble. It's going to be difficult days ahead. This is not, my counselor told me that, the battle is not how do I make life easy? It's how do I live well in a difficult world?
Right.
And so how does the Proverbs 31 woman live well in a difficult world? Well, she's sown into all of these relationships. Mm-hmm. And when her time came where she needed support, they showed up for her.
Yeah.
And you're right. I feel like often we get that mixed up where we kind of like, we're asking and asking and asking, and we're taking withdrawals and not understanding the importance of sowing into community.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And so when we sow in, though, there's all kinds of deposits there where people are like, well, yeah, of course I'm going to show up for you. You've shown up for me in tremendous ways. So
Right. Exactly. All right. I want to shift the conversation a little bit to talk about Evie. We've talked a lot about Amanda and what a great loss she was in your life, but you also lost Evie on that day. How has that particular layer of grief evolved as time has gone by?
Yeah. It's a great question. I think one of the challenging things about any kind of loss is it's so dynamic. Mm-hmm. You've got multiple different ways that you experience the loss. You've got multiple different ways that you're trying to metabolize the loss. And I've talked to a lot of, maybe your audience would really resonate with this. Maybe you've heard this before too, but I've talked to a lot of guys who they struggle with feelings of guilt because, especially in incidents of miscarriage or even maybe stillbirth, it seems to them that it's not impacting them the same way that it's impacting their wife. And they're going, I don't feel connected yet. Right.
Right.
And I struggled with that a little bit early on because I had just recently discovered or learned that she was pregnant.
Yeah.
So she was actually trying to hold that back and surprise me on something that we were doing a panel for our church one Sunday, and we were in a relationship series, and she was going to surprise me in front of our whole church.
Oh,
well, then she started realizing that this second time around with pregnancy, she was beginning to show earlier than what she was the first time around. And she's going, there's no way I can keep this concealed for that long until we get to that point. So she ends up revealing it to me, tell me about it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so ecstatic. And so I all these dreams and excitement and plans, but most men, we kind of don't, it's like the last trimester, right? Is where that it really starts to set in for us. Whereas for the mother, it's like, man, your whole body is being impacted by the nurturing and care of this baby. So there becomes this connection early on. So I kind of struggle with that. A lot of it was so overshadowed by the loss of Amanda.
Right.
But there was a couple of things that really imprinted in me when we were in the hospital and Amanda's being kept alive on machines. They show me, and I still have this picture. They show me a sonogram of Evie, and they were tracking, and she had a heartbeat still.
Oh, wow.
And it was just like this sweet moment where the Lord gave me this moment to pause. And while I still wasn't sure what was going on there, I had this sense that I knew I was at least probably saying goodbye to Evie, at the very least. Mm-hmm. And so I had this moment where I was able to acknowledge this beautiful gift of life that God had given us, and also to say goodbye right there. And so since then, I was very careful. I bought 2 burial plots, we were so grateful for even the people who made it possible, because when it was a criminal investigation, right? Of course. Yes, and so there was a lot that was out of our control with that, but there were some really great people. In fact, the captain of the Indianapolis Police Department personally drove Evie's remains to the funeral, an hour away, to the funeral home an hour away, so that she could also be prepared and buried with Amanda. Wow. And that was not a common practice. In fact, this will cause probably a lot of us to be really frustrated by this, because I was extremely frustrated. But I got a phone call, Jill. I mean, you're talking about hours after everything happened, from the city, and the woman on the other line. I'm trusting that there was no ill intention with this, or that just, this is part of her job. But she just said, "Hey, what do you want to do with the babies?" She said, "What do you want to do with the fetus?" Oh, wow. And that was really hard for me to hear, because I'm like, that's the language of that. Like, it seems so callous. I'm sure you're just trying to be more professional and neutral with this language. And I said, you mean my daughter? Yes. Like, is that what but there was just this keen awareness of the preciousness of life right there. I was so sensitive to that in that moment. And, there's a whole cultural conversation around that. There has been for decades now, but it really set in even heavier with me in that this was my daughter that I had lost. That's right. And, so while the grief has looked different, there's still been this deep grief there. And then it was revisited even more, on a deeper, I think the Lord in his kindness drew me back to that. And I spent a lot of time reflecting on Evie, and in 2 instances immediately following the Amanda's death. And that is, I read Randy Alcorn's book, Heaven. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, Jill, that was so helpful to me to think through. Good. Okay, what will this look like? If Scripture says that he'll make the thief repay 7-fold what he's stolen from us, and if Scripture is promising that he's going to restore the years the locusts have stolen,
That's right. Mm-hmm.
There is a redemptive plan that God has, a restoration plan that God has in the new heaven and new earth. Well, what might that look like?
Right.
To be able to, I don't know, will I be able to recapture those years of raising Evie? I have a daughter now, Natalia, that I inherited, I guess you will say, right, through marriage.
Sure.
And I love my daughter, like absolutely love it. And there is something that I feel remiss about, that I didn't get to see this little girl birthed into the world.
Yes.
And hold her the moment that she came out of Amanda, and walk through those first couple of months of the sleepless nights and the like, right. Oh my gosh, the frustration, right. Yeah. That I have been able to with my two sons. And so I feel remiss about that. And, Christy and I have often talked about, do we want to try to have a fourth, and maybe God would bless us with a little girl. And, we've just kind of in conversations have decided that I don't think that that's going to be something that God's leading us into. And so I'm having to grieve that even now.
Yeah.
And go, wow, at the loss of, and this is, I would always have dreamt of, and man, what could that have been like? And will I get those years recaptured? Mm-hmm. And I like to imagine, even though we don't know this inherently from Scripture, I like to imagine that we do. And so I say all that to say this, Jill. I know I'm kind of rambling, but I was with my father-in-law, or I was with my in-laws last weekend. I was preaching at my father-in-law's church, and one of my sisters-in-laws, we were all talking about Evie, and we're talking about like, what is heaven going to be like, and one of the kids, one of my nephews had asked, like, hey, someone said that when we get to heaven, everyone's going to be 30 years old, which I think he extracts that from, I think the book Heaven is Real. Heaven is for real. Right. Where the kid saw, and like his grandfather was 30 years old. And it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe possibly everyone's going to be kind of at their prime with their new bodies, right? There's a lot of theological questions around that stuff. Nobody really knows.
Right.
And so we were sitting there talking about that, and we laughed. And one of my sisters-in-laws goes, yeah, I've often thought, like, if that were the case, maybe this like 30-year-old man comes walking up to you and goes, hey, I'm Everett. How are you? And we just all kind of die laughing, and like what was so beautiful about that is like, we're all hurting over the loss of Amanda and Evie. Yeah. But over time, the way God has healed our hearts, we can imagine, and we can dream, and we can think about what that might be like. And we can even hold space for like, what if it's not at all what we pictured it to be?
Exactly.
But whatever God has in mind for that is going to be so much better. No eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind can fathom what God has in store for those who love him. Yeah. And so I think that's one of the reasons why this idea of like, we don't grieve as those who have no hope is an anchor for our soul, for all of us. And that somehow, some way, God is going to, in whatever way that he does this, it will be much more amazing than we could ever ask or imagine. He's going to restore what we have lost.
Yes.
So I think that's kind of the journey that my grief has taken when it comes to, Evie. This just like loss of what never was, what could have been, the dreams that I had, while never actually having met her, and then holding the space to go, but what if it's not at all like what I imagined it would be?
Yeah. Yeah. I do believe God is going to redeem that time in whatever way is most perfect in heaven. Like you said, if you might have the opportunity to raise her in some way, or the relationship that you'll have with her one day, I would imagine that's one of the things among the myriad of things that you're looking forward to in heaven one day, is getting to meet her and spend time with her and get to know her in such a special way. That's going to be beautiful. As we close out this first half of my conversation with Davey Blackburn, I hope you've been encouraged by the wisdom and insight he had to share. Next week, we'll continue our conversation and talk about one of the most challenging topics in grief, forgiveness. Davey shares how he came to publicly forgive the men responsible for the deaths of Amanda and Evie, what forgiveness has looked like in the years since, and why he believes it ultimately brings freedom to the one who forgives. We'll also talk about the ministry that grew out of his loss, how God transformed his pain into purpose through Nothing is Wasted Ministries, and what he would say to those who simply can't see any purpose in their suffering right now. I hope you'll come back next week for the conclusion of my conversation with Davey. And as always, if this episode encouraged you, I would love for you to share it with another grieving parent who might need to hear it. You can also help others find it by leaving a rating or a review wherever you listen. It really does make a difference. Thanks again for listening, and I look forward to sharing the rest of our chat with you next Wednesday.